Welcome back to the Chasing Tone podcast. Today we talk about the idea of playing for exposure. I'm sure you've seen this meme all over the internet. Today we dive down real deep and discuss this in depth. So let's get right into it.
How's it going, Brian?
Good. How are you?
It's been a interesting last few days, but hey, I'm alive so far.
It's been a bit since we have podcasted, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah, I thought it had.
You brought the old guy on, and man, I quite enjoyed those episodes actually. So that was that was nice.
Well, I still got the same old comments of you guys never stay on topic. Oh my gosh, man! I swear. Like,
is this new? Like, I mean, I guess it could be new people coming on that never heard it before. I don't know.
I mean, of course, I like to point out like the 1%ers, right? Because the other 99% are like, oh, that's cool, man. You know, I like it whenever you guys just talk and about gear. It's like I'm hanging out with my friends, you know?
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's good because that's what we're good at. We're good at just talking.
Jibber jabber. That's what the gift of gab, as they call it in some circles.
Oh, yes, very true. So, all right, so I got a couple good ones for you today.
Okay,
so
I'm ready.
I'm sure you've seen the meme that's been passed around a bazillion times, a variety of memes that talk about playing for exposure. You know what I mean?
Like the exposure bucks one?
The
one we're talking?
The exposure bucks is indeed one of those. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes. I'm quite familiar with said meme. And I get it, but like there's a couple sides to that coin, aren't there?
Mm-hmm. There is. You know, if you're playing at the VFW, if you're playing at your friend's barbecue, and he's like,
I guess maybe we should explain what we're talking about before we get too far.
True.
Yeah, basically the joke is, the meme in a nutshell is, you know, hey, I'm not going to pay you for your art. We're going to pay you in exposure bucks. And then the guy tries to go buy a hot dog with exposure bucks and he gets turned down. That's essentially like the gist of it, of one of the many. Basically,
right.
they're poking fun at people who say that you're getting exposure, so why should I pay you?
Yeah, I think probably one of the most popular ones is it's from the Oatmeal. I don't know if you ever go to that website called The Oatmeal, but
here and there, yeah.
Yeah, so it's because it's not just about music, right? It's about everybody who does anything creative or artistic in any ways. You know, so so like I'll kind of read through. It's like 4 frames of this graphic, right? It's like a cartoon. So you have 2 guys. One of them says, "Hey, creative person, thanks for making that thing." And then the artist says, "You're welcome. Here's an invoice." And then the other guy says, "An invoice? Never mind that. You're doing it for the exposure. Here's your exposure." And he hands them like a couple dollar bills that say exposure on the top, right? And the artist says, "Oh, wow, that's a ton of exposure. Thank you." And then it says later, that artist walks up to like a hot dog stand and says, "Do you accept these?" And the guy says, "Ha ha ha, expletive. Heck no." I'm changing heck there.
Right.
So I mean, like,
so that's the gist of it.
That's the gist of it. And of course, you know, that's been changed to guitar players and you know everything you could possibly think of that's creative, right?
Exactly.
So, and while it is funny to think of it that way, and there are certain situations where, you know, like if you know, some guy down the road knocks on my door, is like, "Hey, we're having a barbecue and wanted to see if you could get your band together to play for our party." Yeah, you can't, you know, it doesn't pay anything, but there'll be a lot of people there, and you know, it'll be good exposure for you.
Right.
You know, so in that situation, my answer would probably be no. You know, depending on what he's having. If he's got some fine burgers on the grill, we can negotiate. You know what I mean?
That's part of the payment. That's a different story.
That's true. But then again, you know, if Dave Grohl called me up and was like, "Hey, Brian, wanted to see if you and your band could play a few dates. Can't pay you, but, you know, there'll be a lot of people and it might be some good exposure for you, I probably would take him up on that. You know, That's just me personally. If Brad Paisley was like, "Would you like to play a couple dates nearby? Can't pay you, but it'd be good exposure for you." I probably would jump on that like a giggling schoolgirl.
Yeah, I get it, and I get the frustration, and I don't think that the comic or the meme or whatever is referencing those situations. I really do think that they're talking about the guy with the barbecue or the little tiny bar or whatever. I think that's probably more what they're talking about. But I think it actually kind of points to a bigger picture thing here, right? Like musicians, artists, whatever. Everybody needs to get paid because that's unless you can't continue to do what you're doing. But I think it kind of speaks to the general devaluing of music in general, to where people, they don't expect to pay for it, when they can stream it on Spotify or whatever. They don't expect to pay for it anymore. And I think it almost translates into their perception of live performances as well. Like, unless it's Beyonce, they don't expect to pay much for it.
Well, and I think it honestly goes way past music. I mean, look at let's say plugins or impulse responses, for example, which, just a quick, going back real quick, impulse response is something you load into your DAW. That way it allows you to sound like you're playing through a guitar amp. That's the quick short version, right? But it's right. Basically a wave file. So it's a sound file that you load into your recording program on your computer. And there's a lot of people that share these. Because it's a couple megabytes or whatever, and email you the impulse response. Even though there are companies that are paying that charge money for it, for some reason, there's like when things are that easily shared, there's not as much value in it to people. Maybe, I don't know. And I certainly wouldn't. I don't think anyone's asking Ownhammer, which is a big company that makes them, for example, to send me some IRs for exposure. It's still it's the devaluing that I think that you spoke to that happens across everything, especially these days when everything can be shared so easily. And regarding music, there's so many bands. I can't say that. There's a lot of bands, and there's a lot of people, at least here in my area in Indiana, there's a lot of bands that will play for free and for a variety of reasons. Maybe they do want quote-unquote exposure, but there's also some guys that just, they got full-time jobs, and they just, they just like to play, and they're not really doing it for the money. They're just doing it to get out and have fun and play some music with their friends. So, the whole music scene is changing.
Yeah, I think there is some value in performing for free, but I think it goes back to what you were first saying. You need to kind of look at, like, what is it? Are you playing a backyard barbecue with people who don't really care? Then, unless you just really want to, it's not really worth your time. I'm kind of speaking to, like, people who are trying to make a career of it, right?
Sure.
And by the same token, if Dave Grohl calls you, yes, you should probably take that if that is indeed your goal. But honestly, I think it's mostly gray area. I think you need to look at if it's a festival or if it's an event, are these people that I'm being exposed to and being asked to play for not much money, is it actually going to move the needle? I think You need to say, are these my target, so in other
words,
audience?
You have to take off your artistic hat and put on your business hat for a minute. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I know that some don't care about the business side, but I think it's really important to guitar players who don't understand the business of music, that, there's in the past, there have been guys in Nashville who, and I'm sure there are now, who go and play all these clubs for basically, they're playing for tips, man, and a lot of them are hoping to get a bigger gig somewhere for exposure because, it's not uncommon for a big name producer to walk into a club and say, "Holy crap, who's that guy playing?" "Oh, it's Johnny Highland," or it's
right.
Brent Mason. And I mean, Brent Mason, that's how he got his gig, is because Chet Atkins walked in. And he was like, dude, I got to have you on my session, man. You know? And so, like, yeah, Brent played for exposure, and it worked out, you know? And that does...
Yeah, it worked out all right for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a risk versus reward thing that you have to measure. Now, if he was playing at some barbecue, that's much less likely to happen. Although in Nashville, arguably, that's still going to happen.
Yeah, Nashville's a little different all around. It is. It's kind of, there's not really anywhere else like it as far as the exposure. Well, it's honestly, in my mind, it has a lot of parallels to Hollywood. It's just a different industry. You know, like everyone packs their bags, moves to Hollywood to try to become an actor, you know, and everyone packs their bags and moves to Nashville to try to be a musician. Right. So there's a market saturation there too. But I think there's ways. I mean, when musicians put out a video or something on YouTube, they're kind of playing for free then too, and trying to get exposure. It's kind of the same thing, but I don't think anyone looks at it that way.
You're right. Yep.
And we've kind of harped on that before. Like, that's a method you can use, and you can't just put it on YouTube and call it a day. You have to kind of hustle. But you know, there's a handful of artists that I kind of look at how they're positioning and marketing themselves, and it's like, this guy's really got a good, whether they do it on purpose or not, really has a good handle on how to get traction. Right. One of the guys that comes to mind when I think about that stuff is a guy that I haven't really hardly listened to his music, but very little. His name's, have you heard of Mac DeMarco?
I think so.
He's just got, like, I've heard his name a million times and watched some of his silly videos that they put out together as a band, like probably 20 times before I ever like listened to a song from him. And he's got a really big, kind of a little bit lower key kind of hipster following, but he's got a lot of fans and a lot of guys and girls who are just really into his whole vibe, and it's just, which is kind of this like laid back, like sort of hipster thing, and his humor, like, really, I found his humor very entertaining. But like that, my point is, like, he was doing all this random hustle stuff that's just basically free content before I ever listened to his songs, and I think a lot of people probably have a similar experience. This guy's been at it for a long time, but he's just been kind of getting videos shared around here a lot lately. So he's one that I kind of like, you know, he's really, whether he's doing it intentionally or not, he's really doing a good job at gaining exposure for himself. Right. And I don't know, maybe he's doing it on purpose. Maybe he just really enjoys putting out silly content. I'm not sure.
Well, it could be. I mean, I don't think a lot of artists think along the lines of, like, let's say Facebook or Instagram, for example. You're not getting paid to post anything on Facebook or Instagram, most likely, if it's your band, you know? I mean, you're doing it for exposure. You're marketing, you know? And yes, the playing part is what you're good at and is what's the fun part of it. But at the end of the day, it goes back to you have to weigh reward versus risk, you know? I mean, you know, if I was an author and Oprah Winfrey said, "Hey, would you like to come on my show and talk about your book? We can't pay you." I probably would still do that too, you know?
Well, and I don't know how all that talk show circuit stuff works, but I would think that most people who show up on a talk show are not being paid for it. They're probably promoting a book or a movie or a thing. They're not being paid by the show to do that.
Right. Yeah, now their management or their booking company or whatever or their record label or whatever, what have you, they may have something, you know, they may throw you some cash. I don't know. But
I think a lot of times, at least in Hollywood, the way I understand it is, and I could be completely wrong, this is just hearsay, I think that, like, when The Rock goes to do a new movie, I think that's built into his contract. Like, you're going to do XYZ media dates, you know, including the filming. Like, they're kind of paid for it.
Right, that's part of the pay for it, right? Right.
Yeah, that's part of the work they're being paid to do, basically. I think. But like the show's not paying for it. That's their, like you said, the record label / movie studio.
Right.
I think.
So long story short, if you want exposure for your Skinner cover tunes that you're doing, you're playing the Sweet Home Alabamas and the Brown Eyed Girls, and you're like, I would like to be paid for this, and the local bar calls you because there's 10 people that show up there, and they're like, well, we can't pay you. You probably, unless you're doing it purely for fun, that's probably a good thing to avoid, because it's probably not going to further your career if you're trying to get your original music out there,
Right.
So, and that's kind of a big problem here in Indiana, is that, and I think this is different in Portland when you are, but here in Indiana, really no one wants to hear your original music. They really don't. Unless, I take that back. There's a couple blues clubs that Travis Feaster played that I guess people tend to like original music there. But as far as like the average bar that has a band, no,
Right.
I mean, I've been in bands that played like, clubs around, and every time you play your original song, it's like crickets. And then you literally do hear the cliched guy that's like, play some Skinner, and you're like,
Freebird.
yeah, and you're like, okay, all right.
I don't know. I don't really frequent those kind of places myself, and I never really have. Like when I go to shows, it's like I'm going to see a show. I'm not. In fact, I would avoid. And this maybe speaks to my old manness. I would avoid most venues around here that have music, because I just want to sit down and eat a burger if I'm trying to eat, and if I want music, I'll go find music. If that makes any sense.
No,
I don't know.
does. I've been to places before where I didn't know a band was going to be there, and I sit down to eat, and all of a sudden, the band starts sound checking for an hour, and I'm like, oh man, come on! Like I just want a burger, dude. That's really all I want. It's just a burger.
That's the only reason I'm here.
Right.
But by that same token, I am a big music fan. So like, if there's a band coming that I want to see, I'm super pumped about it.
Right. So like when Luke Bryan comes to town, you're there, dude.
No. No. In fact, I would try to avoid the area at all costs, just in case I ran into him. I want to avoid that at all costs if I can.
Hey, speaking of country music going downhill, so I'm sorry, Luke. I'm sorry. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing you, man. So there, I just recently found this out.
Okay.
Apparently, New Kids on the Block is being played. I guess they came out with new music. I had no idea they were even still a thing. But apparently, they're being played on the local country music station here.
What?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
New Kids on the Block?
New Kids on the Block. Yeah.
I mean, I have no problem with New Kids on the Block being New Kids on the Block, but why is it? Well, you know what? I should say that's not shocking.
They're the right stuff.
It's not shocking at all. My wife was like, "Hey, have you heard this new Keith Urban / Carrie Underwood song?" I was like, "No," and then she turned it on, and I'm like, "What on earth?" Like it was literally like a dance track, and that's fine if that's what it is. But they're labeling it as country music, and I'm like, "Okay, this is just." I thought we couldn't go any further, but like I didn't even hear a guitar. Granted, I didn't listen to it for quite long enough to hear if there was a solo or something, but right. I didn't hear one guitar on it. It was all electronic.
The solo is completely dead in country music. I mean, so just in talking to different session players, they all talk about how, when it was the 90s, they could really cut loose some, and play some cool stuff. And now it's like, nah, we just need some filler here. Like nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just something that fits within the song.
That's got to be boring for them.
Oh man.
Especially when they came up in the 90s.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the thing that I like about going to specifically country concerts. is even if even when it is like the Luke Bryans and stuff, and this is gonna blow your mind. When it even is those type of guys, when they're sound checking and there's no one there, they're playing like Merle Haggard and stuff. Mm-hmm. That's what they're not sound checking their music. I mean, unless they have to, but if they're just jamming, and a lot of times they will, they'll play some actual real country stuff,
Yeah.
And so, the sound checks are actually funner than the concerts, I think.
I believe that. The artists will go unnamed, but like, when I was in Nashville, we went to a show at the Ryman, and it was like a big kind of like rotating thing. It was Vince Gill was and the oh boy, I'm gonna get slapped. I forgot what his band that the Time Jumpers.
Oh, the Time Jumpers. Yeah.
So it was that, and then they also had like a rotating kind of cast of vocalists coming in and sitting in with them here once in a while. And one of them was a guy that I knew that I couldn't stand his music, and I was like, oh no, this guy. But then they played a Merle cover, and it was awesome.
Right.
So,
and you're like, why isn't this being played on country radio?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not like I'm a big fan of a lot of different types of music. You know what I mean? Like, and this is gonna blow your mind. Like even like what I don't even know what to call it. I asked my son what it's called. I'm like, what would you call this? He's like, it's rap, Dad. And I'm like, no, it's not really rap. Like rap is like Public Enemy or Eazy-E or something to me. But it's
that's what we think of it. Yeah,
it's kind of like EDM, and I don't know. On Spotify, it comes up as chill. So maybe it's called chill. Serious chill music. But it's,
all right, okay.
It's very electronic based. There is not a guitar to be found in it, and I like some of that stuff too. Sometimes it really depends on my mood. Because like I'm all over the place with what I like. I mean, if from Frank Sinatra to, I'm going to an Avenged Sevenfold concert tomorrow, or not tomorrow.
You are
2 days. Avenged Sevenfold and Metallica. So
all right.
Get to hang out with my buddy Kirk.
Mm-hmm. You gonna talk Wahs?
I'm gonna steal his wall and see what happens.
I can't play the show. My Wah's gone. They probably have backup Wahs for him though. They'll just slide another one in there.
There's probably drawers full of Wahs just in case. But yeah. So it's all over the place. What I personally like, which I know we're completely going away from the topic, but that's okay because it's my sandbox and I can do what I want.
That's right. But to get I do want to say something real quick about Kirk Hammett and Metallica, and this is actually a good thing. I poke fun at the Wah and everything a lot, but I gotta say, like, Metallica was a turning point for me. The Black Album in particular, when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah, when you were a kid, oh my gosh, you're making me feel old, dude. To me, I'll never forget the time that I was a skater at the time, actually. And and that was like being a skateboard. When I say skating, I mean skateboarder for those who may not know.
Right.
And at that time, like that, I was like 14, so that was like 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, 6 years ago.
Plus a few. But at that time, like we all had like ramps and stuff, like in this parking lot. And a dude from town he brought a guitar and an amp. And he started playing like Metallica, like from Kill 'Em All, that album, Kill 'Em All, and stuff from Garage Days, which is like old school, old Metallica, way before Black. And like that, I think that was the first time that I really had been introduced to it, and I was like, "Holy crap, what is that?" And yeah, so I spent a lot of time learning Seek and Destroy.
There you go.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how it sounds, too.
Wow. No wonder you make such good pedals. You can mimic the tone with your tongue. It's impressive.
But yeah, so I mean, yeah, you're right. People do give Kirk a pretty hard time for overuse of the wah, but he does use the wah quite a bit, man.
He does. I'm just saying, like, I don't think I've publicly talked about the fact that I do like Metallica, even though I do tease them and ridicule the wah all the time. I actually, I like Metallica. So there we go. Let the record show.
I liked him since the beginning, since the Black Album, Blake says.
No, I'm saying that album was a turning point for me.
I was a mere kid, and back then, and it was the Black Album, and Enter Sandman was playing.
No, like, because before that, before I really got exposed to that stuff, I mean, all that I came up on was outlaw country and, like, 90s country. That's basically all I'd listened to because that's what my parents listened to. And then when my friends were like, hey, check out this stuff. And the first one I had listened to happened to be the Black Album. I was like, oh, this is good stuff. And so, yeah, the Black Album was a big deal for me musically anyway.
And you're like, and your mom's like, Blake, turn that stuff off. And you're like, but Mom, nothing else matters.
Right. Exactly. Oh, speaking of my mom, I've talked about it on my show before, but I don't know if I've told you this story before. Stop me if I have, because I don't want to rehash anything too much, even though this has nothing to do with what we were originally talking about. But back in the day, around that time, around when I found Metallica and some other stuff, I got really into System of a Down.
Yeah.
And my buddy convinced me that, like, we should start a band and I should be the drummer, which was a horrible mistake because I'm an awful drummer and I was even worse back then than I am now. But so he sold me his drum kit for super cheap, and my mom tolerated me. Keep in mind, this house is not that big. It's like a 1,400 square foot ranch house or something.
Right.
She tolerated me setting up my drums in my bedroom, blasting my stereo with music that she hated, like System of a Down, and me attempt to badly play along with who's actually a really good drummer. And I would just do that for, like, she would let me do that for like an hour or two. I don't know that I would let my kid do that.
But it's funny you bring that up. So my nephew, I'm actually getting ready to go visit him in a few days. But so my nephew is 16 now. And believe it or not, like, he's not your typical 16-year-old dude. This is a kid that is into, like, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses. He's into Metallica. This is why we're going to the Metallica and Avenged Sevenfold concert, because he's a huge fan of them, right?
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right, well, I know Brian from Avenged Sevenfold, or Sinister, Sinister Gates. And I'm like, let me see if I can get a hookup, and maybe we can go meet him and that kind of thing. Because he'd never done anything like that before, ever, but he's a big fan. So anyway, he plays guitar, keyboards, he sings, and he plays drums. Okay? Now, his mom, before she bought the drums, she was like asking me what drums to get and all this stuff. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, have you ever heard drums in a house before? And she's like, no, but his name's Kyle. But Kyle's really wanting them. I'm like, okay. So I got her hooked up there. Checked back in with them after they got him in, and she's like, holy crap, how do you make them quieter? And I said, here's what you do. You get, like, some 1-inch thick foam, like big foam walls, and you make a box, and you cover them inside this box. Just leave a little hole in there for air. I said,
and then you'll still hear them.
You're right. You'll just hear less of them. But yes, you'll still hear them. Or alternatively, put them outside on the sidewalk and let your neighbors deal with it.
And that was something I did once in a while. It was kind of funny because we played outside at my place a couple times in as a kid. And I remember in particular one time my neighbor poked his head over the fence and was like, oh, okay. He thought we were just out there jamming, like cranking our stereo, and he was going to be like, "Turn it down!" But it was, which is actually kind of cool of him, because he was like, he looked over the fence and was like, "Oh, they're actually playing music. I guess that's okay." And he just like, "Never mind. I was going to tell you to turn it down, but since you guys are actually playing, it's fine."
I was going to tell you to get off my lawn, but you're not on my lawn, so yeah.
Right. He actually came onto our lawn to tell us,
"Get off your lawn."
Yeah. But he was like, I thought you were just cranking your Ghetto Blaster, but you guys are actually playing, so it's okay.
Your Ghetto Blaster.
That's exactly what he said.
I could picture that. Yeah, because that would be a Ghetto Blaster at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just the image of Blake with a Ghetto Blaster walking around on his shoulder is cracking me up.
Yeah, that literally never happened. Although I kind of wish that it would have. That would have been quite funny.
Yeah, we had the Ghetto Blasters back then. And it was a big deal when you got one with a dual cassette player.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
The
Big
pinnacle of technology. Oh, yeah.
Mine was even a step up from that, Brian. It was a cassette player / CD player.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Man, you guys must have had money.
No. It was just much later in the time frame. It was like the mid 90s or late 90s.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I totally remember whenever CDs came into existence, and they were expensive, man. Like, to buy a CD player is expensive, and of course, I think it was made by Walkman. It was like a little portable CD player, and it had like a tape adapter you could put in your tape player, and so it would read off the heads and play the music, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I rocked that. I just stopped using that like last year, man. Mm-hmm. No, I'm teasing.
I know. I know a couple guys you might be joking, but I do know a couple guys that have like their car still has a tape adapter in it or a tape player in it, and so they're like, well, those radio ones, like for your phone, the adapters, they never really work that well. The tape adapters work way better if that's what you have.
Yeah.
Like way better.
Yep.
So I know a couple guys that are rocking the tape adapter.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
We need to reach out to these folks and help them buy a CD player. We need that. You should start a campaign on Facebook on Instagram. On the Tone
buy
Mob
a
group.
CD player.
Right.
It's okay. Well, there is a CD player. Like, it's a CD and cassette player, but like they are up to date enough that everything's on their phone.
Right.
So the easiest way to get it from the phone to the car is
I
still
see
the tape adapter.
I see what you. So the tape adapter's in it, and then the other side of the plug actually plugs into the phone.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that'll work just fine.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Very
How
cool.
in the world do we do this?
So playing for exposure.
How on earth do we do this? I don't understand. This is uncanny.
I can bring this all the way back around. See, they're using those tape adapters because they're playing that music for exposure. Right?
They're exposing themselves to music.
They're exposing themselves. Their ears are taking in, delights of sound, from the tape adapter. Because
unless they're listening to this podcast, then they're
true.
They're not getting delighted at all.
Oh my goodness!
But I do think we made our point about the whole exposure thing.
I believe so.
Even though we went off the deep end and just talked about our musical histories, but whatever.
All right, so that's for this week's show.
Okay, that works for me.
So thank you again for listening to Chasing Tone Podcast. I really appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email podcast@wamplerpedals.com. You can email Blake at info@tonemob.com. And again, if you're on Facebook, make sure you check out our groups. He's got the Tone Mob group. I've got the Wampler Pedals Tone group, it's called. And again, if you have any questions, shoot us an email, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.